Welcome back. Well, Russia and China signing a new agreement for a new gas pipeline after Vladimir Putin met with Xi Jinping in Shanghai yesterday. This binding agreement sets up a massive pipeline to deliver gas from Russia to China through Mongolia over the next 30 years. It's all happening at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit underway right now. It features leaders from China, Russia, India, North Korea, and Iran will show up tomorrow. India's Prime Minister Modi visiting China for the first time in 7 years as President Trump's 50% tariff on India took effect last week. The president calling the U.S.-India-U.S. trade relationship, quote, a totally one-sided disaster, and adding they have now offered to cut their tariffs to nothing, but it's getting late. They should have done so years ago. Joining me now is Stevens Inc. Executive Vice President, former senior advisor to Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Mary Kissel back with me. Mary, great to see you. Thank you so much for being here.
It's great to be back on the show.
Well, I want to get your take about this meeting that's underway in Shanghai. You also point out that the implications of the tariff ruling against President Trump here at home. Tell us more about what this meeting is telling us.
Well, I think the relationship between Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin is really no surprise, Maria. We've talked at length on this program about the no-limits friendship between those two rogues, if you will. I think the real news here is Prime Minister Modi of India and his embrace of Vladimir Putin. That's a clear signal to the United States. And I think there are a couple of lessons here. First of all, I met Modi way back when he was Chief Minister of Gujarat, I think more than 15 years ago. We misjudged him then. And I wonder if we're misjudging him now, just because he's the head of a major democracy, the most populous democracy in the world, doesn't mean that he shares our worldview or shares our idea of what's in our mutual interest. I think the second lesson is that, if we are really serious about considering communist China the greatest threat to the United States and our way of life, we need India. It's just a fact. We can't fight them alone in Asia Pacific. We need the heft of not just Australia, not just our friends in Japan, but also India. So I think this meeting is highlighting a major challenge for the Trump administration.
Yeah, I mean, and not only that, but, there were so many corporates who felt that if they were going to take their supply chains out of China, they would put it in India. And now that is being rethought as President Trump is encouraging them to bring it to America, even if it's more expensive.
Well, President Trump is correct that it has been a very one-sided trade relationship for many decades, and that's not new to this administration. I think Republicans and Democrats in the White House have struggled with that for decades. I mean, remember, the opening up of the relationship happened under Bill Clinton. We've been working on these issues for years. But again, if you believe that China is the greatest threat to us, and if you accept my argument that we need India then in the fold with us, the problem that we're facing is that even if we say, gosh, we don't buy a lot of stuff from India, they need us more than we need them, China doesn't think the same way. So if we walked away from the table here, or if we said, gosh, we're just going to punish them with tariffs because we need this trade relationship to equalize, again, the president is right about that. The problem that we face is that China is standing right behind, trying to improve the relationship, trying to step in if we step back. And we've seen that throughout Southeast Asia. We've seen it in Cambodia. We've seen it in Laos. We've seen it in Thailand and Maria. We've got governments in Asia Pacific that are not on our side, old friends and democracies of ours. I mean, what if China targets South Korea next and President Lee, who wants to make nice with North Korea and wants to make nice with China, right? That's why I think it's a real challenging moment for the administration. I have confidence that the president, when he sees things don't work, he changes tack. And I think that, this summit this weekend is highlighting a major inflection point in our relationships in that part of the world.
Well, I don't know, but I was interested to see a NATO ally there as well. The head of Turkey, Erdogan, is also at that summit. You've got China and Russia backing Iran at the summit as well, condemning a move by European countries to reimpose UN sanctions on Tehran over its nuclear activities. The UK, France, Germany invoking those snapback sanctions, accusing the country of violating the 2015 nuclear deal. Of course, that's the deal that President Trump pulled out of in his first term. The Wall Street Journal writes, quote, actually enforcing the snapback sanctions will require hard work by Western politicians, diplomats, and experts. And I know, Mary, you worked on this exact issue when you worked for the first Trump administration, the Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's office.
Yeah, we did work very hard on that. Just for your viewership, remember the snapback sanctions were supposed to be the safety blanket for those who were uncomfortable with President Obama's nuclear deal. You know, the argument was if Iran breaks its commitments under the nuclear deal, hey, don't worry, any signature to this nuclear deal can trigger the quote-unquote snapback of UN sanctions. Because remember, Iran is a threat in many ways. They're also a huge arms trafficker, drug trafficker, illicit finance, funding terror groups, you know, ballistic missile development, nuclear programming. They're a threat on many levels. So we said, okay, that's fine. Go ahead, Europe. Iran is not in compliance. This is under Trump 1. Please snap back the sanctions. And they said, nah, we don't want to do that. We think that would be a win for President Trump. So we worked very hard on this issue. We got very, very little support. And everybody knew what Iran was doing and how grossly they were violating the terms of that agreement, which, by the way, they were violating as they were signing it. And so what did it take for Britain, France, and Germany to come around to invoke snapback sanctions? It took October 7th. It took the Houthis firing missiles into the Bab el-Mandeb Strait and the Red Sea. It took a lot of killing in Lebanon, in Syria, in Iraq. It took a lot of, frankly, innocent lives for them to realize, gosh, it's time. Oh, not to mention direct attacks on Israel, as we've all watched on this network over the last year. And so it's good that they've snapped back sanctions. But the lesson here, Maria, for Ukraine in those negotiations is, if the United States is not a party to a peace deal and we're not willing to enforce it, the Europeans aren't going to do it for us. That is the lesson of what we learned in the snapback sanctions. Something really bad has to happen for the Europeans to get off the couch and say, okay, it's time for us to enforce the words on the piece of paper that we signed. And so good for the E3 to do it. It's a victory for the White House. But, there are lessons here for future deals and future challenges for the White House.
I mean, so how is President Trump going to stop this war in Ukraine? I mean, look, you say, we need India, but India is buying Russian oil. I asked Christine Lagarde last week, the president of the European Central Bank, why the Europeans are still buying Russian oil. President Trump's deadline for Putin to set up a bilateral meeting with Ukraine's Zelensky came and went yesterday. The Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, told me and continues to say everything's on the table when it comes to potential Russian sanctions, while Putin defends more attacks on Ukraine. And the Kremlin is being accused right now of jamming the GPS navigation of a plane carrying EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen over Bulgaria yesterday. The plane landed safely, but there were worries there that was close to an assassination attempt against her, Mary. Your reaction?
Yeah, that was a very serious thing, one of many provocations that Russia engages in. Look, President Trump and his national security team have to answer two very difficult questions. The first is, can they trust Vladimir Putin to respect any treaty that they negotiate based on his history? And if they can get comfortable with that and say, yes, we can, then they have to answer a second, even more difficult question, which is, how do we come to an arrangement that doesn't signal weakness to our enemies in China, in North Korea, in Iran? And so these are two very difficult challenges that they need to tackle. And I wish them the best of luck. The good news is, Maria, at least all options are on the table this time around, unlike the prior administration.
Well, look, that GPS jamming of the navigation system is because of operations in space. And I want to point out that we've got a new special on Fox Nation, The Enemy Above, where I look at space and why it's so important. Most people don't realize why space is so important. It's national security. It's where our satellites are. Mary, great to get your insights. We so appreciate your time this morning. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Maria.
All right, Mary Kissel, and check out The Enemy Above on Fox Nation. We'll be right back.